Hello and welcome to Crypto Convos, episode 5. I'm here with Michael Goldstein, president of the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute. He's joining me from Texas. How are you doing today, Michael?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me. Now, I've been getting to know Michael over the past couple weeks. Yes, the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute is really interesting, and I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But I kind of want to ask you about your personal philosophy, where you kind of started from, and how you came to where you are now, kind of in the Bitcoin space. What's your philosophical outlook?
Right. Well, I've been very deeply interested in Austrian economics and anarcho-capitalism since I guess it was like my junior year of high school. Now to think about it, was a long time ago. So I've been interested in that, and of course, like all good Austrians, I was a huge gold bug and wanted the gold standard and all of that. And I learned about Bitcoin in 2011 when Daniel Krauwitz, also from the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, had messaged me, and right on that big run up in the summer of 2011, he was like, "Michael, I think I found a great new investment opportunity." He sent me the link, and I didn't really think much of it, and I kind of forgot about it later on. Although I did get to watch it crash. But then I also started to hear about the Silk Road, and I thought that was super cool. I remember very shortly after happening, I was like, oh, well, I guess the drug war's over. And that continued, but it wasn't until, I guess it was late 2012, so about October 2012, Cody Wilson, who's also now with the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, came to our university group at the University of Texas called Libertarian Longhorns to talk about his new Defense Distributed project. But he wasn't so much talking about guns per se, as much as sort of the politics of revolution and the promise of these new technologies that we're seeing, that we've seen developed over the past couple of decades with public key cryptography. And with that, he was introducing me to Timothy Main, the crypto-anarchist manifesto, and all of that. And in all of this mix, he started talking about Bitcoin as well, as sort of one of the technologies that has this huge promise. There's somewhere with that it finally clicked that there were this true, political implications of Bitcoin that, of course, really resonated with me. So after that, I immediately was trying to look up as much as I could about Bitcoin. And a lot of Austrians had a lot of trouble understanding Bitcoin. They still do today. So I was under this impression, well, is it a fiat money? Is it really backed by something or whatever? But at UT, we had a group called the Mises Circle that I started, I guess, sometime in like sophomore year. We started talking about Bitcoin and trying to figure out these economic questions. And we quickly, figured out a lot of these kind of basic Austrian hang-ups with Bitcoin, and we quickly saw that, it's exactly what we wanted in a sound money, and not only that, it was way better than anything else that had ever existed, including our precious gold, and it truly had the potential to just absolutely change everything. And so pretty much immediately, all of us were hooked, and just read about it constantly, talked about it constantly, and that later on down the road, that led to the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute.
So what do you find are the biggest hang-ups with Austrians as far as getting them on board with Bitcoin? What are some of the things that you talk to them about to encourage them to use Bitcoin? I know a lot of people are still resistant to it. A lot of anarcho-capitalists, I think, are very resistant to it because they're very much still stuck in that mindset that you can't hold it because it's not gold. So what are the ways that you kind of talk to some other Austrian economists about this to kind of get them on board?
The biggest hang-up absolutely is the complete lack of knowledge of how Bitcoin works. So they they try to analyze it from this from an Austrian economics perspective, but they don't even actually know what problems Bitcoin is solving. You know, with the things like the Byzantine generals problem and these problems of coordination in a distributed computer network, that they haven't even touched that, and so they're simply thinking about it as just numbers on a screen that, for some reason, some people like to think is like gold. So technological illiteracy is the #1 issue. But and then they throw around a lot of things about the regression theorem, which is so 2012. So they don't understand. For one, they have a notion that Bitcoin doesn't have intrinsic value, which is, for an Austrian, absurd on its face. So you automatically lose Austrian credentials if you are to say something like that, because nothing has intrinsic value. All value is subjective. Then you get stuff like with the regression theorem, oh, it's not a money, it's not a medium of exchange, stuff like that, which on its face is also ridiculous because there's many ways we classify things as money, so that's not something worth touching necessarily. But the medium of exchange part, we already see it being used as a medium of exchange. So if it's logically necessary for a good to have had some prior use value of some sort in order for it to then become a medium of exchange, well, then that would mean logically that because we see it being used as a medium of exchange, it had to have had some use value. And then it's really just up to the economic historian to actually go back and figure out, well, why were people valuing it? But the fact is we see it being used as a medium of exchange, so it's absurd to say it's not. And then, beyond that, I think they just sort of hold on to old habits, and there's sort of a fetish for calling things bubbles and stuff. So they just hold on, seemingly without real economic reasoning, like, oh, well, even if it is kind of a thing, it's not going to win out, or it's still not better than gold. I'm still not quite sure why they think it's not better than gold, because there's not a single type of cost that gold is superior to Bitcoin. It's really a matter of will the dollar or will Bitcoin win out? Gold isn't even used as a money anywhere anyway.
Right, not really much anymore. You've seen some countries kind of demanding it, they maybe wanting to switch over to use it for oil, but it hasn't really been super successful. They haven't been successful in really pushing that. Do you find, what are some of your favorite kind of economic fallacies that people bring up about Bitcoin? Or you often hear these things like, oh, it's just like tulip bulbs, or it's a Ponzi scheme. Like, what's your favorite one?
Yeah, those are good, and then you don't get this as much from the Austrians. And when you do, it's another time you get to shame them. But non-Austrians, you hear the deflation thing. That's always fun, because these people are horrified at the idea that we would have so much productivity that everything would be super cheap and abundant. And somehow that's a terrible thing.
So you kind of come from the economic side of things, but you seem to have a pretty good technical understanding of it. What were some sources that kind of helped you understand the technical side of Bitcoin?
So first and foremost, the Satoshi white paper is the best introduction, hands down. Has been since the day Bitcoin came into existence. We actually made a really nice HTML version of it on our website, nakamotoinstitute.org/Bitcoin. So you don't have to download the PDF anymore. You can just read it on your phone or tablet or whatever. It's what, 9 pages, and it covers all of the kind of data structures and networking stuff at a high level, so you can understand, what exactly is the blockchain, how does it work, what is the purpose of proof of work, stuff like that. So the white paper is an absolute must-read for anyone who wants to be involved in Bitcoin. Beyond that, the Bitcoin Wiki has been a tremendous help, because that'll have a page on most of the important technical aspects of it. Trying to think of what else. Khan Academy has a series of videos. It's about 9 or 10 videos, and each one covers a specific aspect of the technology, and that was very well done. So I highly recommend that as well. And recently, a student, I believe from the Netherlands, I could provide you with a link you could put in the YouTube description, but he wrote out a protocol specification for, I guess it was like 0.86, so it's not the latest Bitcoin, but it goes through, it's like a 25-page document or so, and he really goes through every piece of the code to kind of give this high level but still technical description of how all the pieces are working together. So stuff like that is a fantastic resource as well.
Yeah, I'd really like to take a look into that, because that's another criticism you hear from people is, oh, well, I don't read code, and you're just supposed to tell me to trust, have blind trust in these people who've read the code and okayed it. What if it's an NSA, backdoor or something like that? I kind of hear that a lot. So yeah,
Right.
Definitely send that over. I'll put that in the description. That's really interesting.
Right, and the interesting thing about that argument is, meanwhile, would you rather use Federal Reserve notes where the protocol specification is countless number of pages long. It's written behind closed doors, and even if you want to change it, you don't really get to. Meanwhile, Bitcoin, the code is not tremendously long. If you have the dedication, you can get through it. Of course, it does require a technical background. But it's also open source, so thousands of programmers are working on it. People get into heated arguments about what it is because it's open. People can decide what code they would actually like to use. And if people truly disagree, they can basically get up and use a new network. So to some degree, I mean, there is this. It's not trustless per se, in the sense that I, for instance, I can't say that I've gone through every line of the code, and I'm not a big C++ guy, so I wouldn't understand every single detail of it as well. But it's still open for everyone to see. So the trust issue is a lot more distributed and much less risky than otherwise.
And there's a political nature that goes along with Bitcoin. Something that Cody Wilson likes to say is holding dollars is a political decision because of what the dollar is backed by and what it represents throughout the world. And this is a currency that's largely backed by building the empire, basically, whereas Bitcoin, you see quite the opposite. And people don't really like to talk about that much, where they try to downplay it, especially when they're trying to kind of make it safe for mass consumption. They kind of say, oh, no, it's not really this kind of radical technology. It's kind of, it's you can turn it into a gift card and buy stuff with it, and it's just another currency to use. And yeah, that's a part of it, but it also has political implications. And what do you think about that?
Right. Well, I gave a whole talk on this at the Texas Bitcoin conference back in March. It's called Bitcoin, an Experiment in Anarchism. You can search for it on YouTube. And in that, I actually, I pointed out there's a group of people who either want to say that Bitcoin is politically neutral. They want to say that, oh, it's just a payment system, and stuff like that. So there's people who will openly say, that, oh, well, I'm a Democrat and I still like Bitcoin and stuff like that. But what I say is, if we look at the way the code works, all of it is anarchist. And there's no way to get around that. And not only that, I mean, it was purposefully supposed to be that way. You know, Satoshi never said, I'm an anarchist. And in fact, Satoshi may have, you know, who knows if he was one himself. But we know from the actual code, what the code allows for is nothing but anarchy. Or rather, the way it works is anarchist. So, for instance, everyone has a private key that they get to control. So this inherently has a sort of individualist autonomy. There's no way to transfer property on the blockchain except through voluntarily signing a message that says so, meaning that you can't have someone just willfully change the ledger. You know, the entire purpose of Bitcoin was to make a ledger that couldn't be changed like that. Couldn't be forged. And it also, of course, has no central issuer. So that's basically saying that, you know, no monopoly should be able to arbitrarily set rules for how property title transfer should be. So all of this, of course, lines up directly with, you know, anarcho-capitalism is how I define it. Some people might call it something else, but you know, it's implicitly anarchist. And you know, I don't go around Bitcoin as anarchist.
Kind of losing you a little bit. Looks like we're having a little bit of connection issues. I'm not sure if you can still hear me, Michael. It looks like we can kind of see you, but you're frozen and there's no audio. This sometimes happens with Hangouts. I might retitle this One Woman's Struggle with Hangouts on Air. Oh, it looks like we got you back.
Where did I cut off?
I think you were about to say I don't always describe Bitcoin as anarchy. I think it's kind of where you were going.
Oh, sure. Okay. So yeah, so I don't, you know, go up to everyone that I'm going to talk about Bitcoin, which is everyone. I don't go and say, you know, oh, use Bitcoin because it's anarchist, because it's going to end the Fed, etc. Instead, I just, for most people, it's good to just, tell them why they should be wanting to use this. You know, it's cheaper, it's more efficient than any other payment system. More secure, etc. You get to be your own bank. So many positive things that simply don't require any kind of radical bent. But if they start using that, they're enjoying the benefits of anarchy. So really, instead of promoting anarchy on an ideological level, we've gotten to the point with the technology that exists that we can simply promote anarchy on an economic level. It's just this thing, whether they know it's anarchist or not, whether they care about anarchy or not, is just a better choice to be using regardless. It's like why, someone might want to...
Oh, I lost him completely. Goodness. Well, yeah, to add on Michael's point, I definitely agree. I think you can talk to people without implying this political nature, because anarchy isn't something that you can really force on people. So, all right, you're back. I was just kind of adding on to your point. You can't really force anarchy on people, like you can, explain to them Bitcoin, all of the different uses that go along with it. But yeah, you don't have to, force an ideology on anyone by using it.
Right. It's just at this point, it's just a better choice. People choose Uber instead of a government-sanctioned monopolist taxi company just because it's a better choice. So it doesn't require getting upset about this monopolist taxi company because they simply can't compete anymore.
And we're not competing with perfect when it comes to Bitcoin. Bitcoin definitely has its flaws, and it has a lot of its critics. But what I find is interesting is what it's criticized for isn't really, I don't find it to be that big of a deal compared to the current system we have and all of the flaws inherent with it. So I do kind of find it strange people are so quick to criticize Bitcoin, which you should be skeptical about any new technology that just kind of comes up, you know. But yeah, I mean, I don't think people are being completely fair when they're criticizing it, because it's not competing with perfect, it's competing with something that's very flawed. So oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Go on.
All right. So, how did its political nature influence you to start the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute? How did that start? What was the idea?
Most definitely. So the biggest thing I noticed was, you know, when people talked about the history of Bitcoin, it would go back to, I guess, like 2009 or even 2008 when Satoshi released the white paper. But the technology that went into creating Bitcoin didn't just appear overnight. Like Satoshi did not come up with these ideas in a vacuum. He was building off decades of work. So I wanted to have a place where we could start teaching people about all of these kind of prior ideas. So going all the way back, you know, Whitfield Diffie coming up with the two of Whitfield Diffie and Martin Hellman coming out with public key cryptography in the 70s. David Chaum with anonymous remailers and digital cash, blinded digital cash too. You know, Adam Back with Hashcash, which is now used in Bitcoin for the mining. You know, understand like where the lineage of ideas, so that people have a better understanding of, you know, what was the problem that was trying to be solved in the first place. Just so happens that these people, these cypherpunks, were trying to solve the problem of taking control away from governments over our flow of information.
So we have a good question from Chris Ellis. Hey Chris, thank you for watching. Let's see, Citigroup recently said the sell side on Bitcoin markets is mounting up as merchants are forced to sell immediately and miners are facing rising costs and liquidating early. This is kind of a comment. So what are your thoughts on that?
I actually haven't had a chance to read that article yet, and I haven't been paying as close to the markets, attention to the markets as my friends. So I don't know if I'd be able to give you a well-reasoned enough answer to that.
Okay, well, he has a bit of a follow-up with that. This, along with capital gains tax implications for consumers, how do you see short to medium-term time horizon for Bitcoin, not just in price, but also in viability as an experiment?
Well, my short answer is that I would just expect any jurisdiction that decides to make it more costly to operate in Bitcoin will just see an outflow of capital. So, you know, people can get up and move. Money can flow. You can just send the Bitcoins elsewhere. People can set up elsewhere. So, yeah, there is sort of like a problem with specific jurisdictions. We're seeing people in New York, you know, they're not going to be able to access as many Bitcoin services as us. And likewise, there's certain services that we, being in America, can't access either. For instance, like Coinapult. So that's just kind of part of the game, but Bitcoin itself still goes on.
And do you think you're going to see a trend in that, or do you think that we're going to be seeing increasing regulation as things go on and a move away from just even doing business involved in Bitcoin in America?
Well, I don't know if we'll see increased regulations necessarily, in the sense that different governments are going to be competing to one another, because there's sort of a fine line you have to walk, because Bitcoin does, you know, increase, you know, revenue that the state could, you know, take parasitically. So you don't want to be the politician that, you know, destroys jobs. You have to be the politician that creates jobs. So on the one hand, you want to be having this like innovation in your jurisdiction, but you also don't want people to be, you know, too radical or whatever. So I would expect jurisdictions to be competing with one another, trying to walk that line. But so we'll have to see. You know.
What are your thoughts on the New York regulations? Have you read through them, through the details of those?
I skimmed through the. Let's see. There was. I definitely read the announcement, and I looked through quite a bit of the actual proposition. It's not great, of course. But I also, I'm not one to worry about regulation because, for instance, the New York regulation tends to focus it on services that I don't actually think are good for the Bitcoin space. So I don't think that it's good to have a trusted third party holding your Bitcoins. That's a no-no. I don't even recommend people use the lauded services like Coinbase, except perhaps to buy Bitcoins and then immediately send them elsewhere. So I'm totally cool with. Sorry, I shouldn't say that, but I'm not immediately up in arms when someone says, "Oh, you probably shouldn't be having these services, these third-party services." Of course, Ben Lawsky does not like them because of those same reasons. But people should not be using trusted third parties in anyway. And there's also stuff in there about what is it, like fractional reserves, basically. So he said like they are very stringent about making sure you actually have the money you say you have. Well, I'm totally cool with that. So that's sort of a consumer protection policy that I would expect to emerge in the free market anyway. So by this, I don't mean to suggest by any means that I support the regulations in any sense. What I'm trying to say is I don't think that it's antithetical to where I envision Bitcoin going anyway. So
All right.
I want to see the end of those services anyway. So a criminal organization like the New York Department of Financial Services coming down on them is just doing it in a different way than I would expect the market to itself. So it's of course not justified, but it's not. I don't see it as something that will destroy Bitcoin by any means.
So I want to go back for a minute to the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute. You see a lot of these other groups in Bitcoin that are really familiar. The Bitcoin Foundation is one. I think Perry and Boring just founded the Center for Digital Chamber of Commerce.
Right. Yeah.
And how does the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute differ from these organizations, and what are some of the other functions of it?
Well, the Bitcoin Foundation is very much like a trade organization. So they have a lot of corporate sponsors, and they support different businesses, and they try to do stuff to standardize the code and stuff like that. They're trying to do a lot of things. For us, and this isn't to be an us versus them thing. There's, in fact, I think there's a place for many types of organizations. I'm not interested in sort of the trade organization aspect of it. What I'm interested in doing is teaching people about the history of Bitcoin and teaching them about the implications of Bitcoin. So we have a couple pages on the website. We have the literature page, which is sort of the history section. So it has these papers dating back to our earliest one is an essay by John Milton from like 1644, where he's talking about the free press. So I think that's a great kind of starting point in history, talking about that. These are problems that have eternally existed in the human experience, and we're just dealing with them on a much different technological scale. So we have that, and that goes through all of the cypherpunk history and all that. And we have our blog, which is called the Mempool, the Memory Pool, and that's where we're trying to kind of look at the next ideas in Bitcoin. In that, now that Bitcoin exists, what kind of economic implications are there? What would be good strategies for Bitcoin? Stuff like that. So that covers some more of the scholarship. And finally, also, the cypherpunks had a maxim. I don't know if it existed before this, but it's in Eric Hughes's Cypherpunk Manifesto, and he simply says, cypherpunks write code. So all of this, we don't want legal solutions to things. We don't want political solutions to things. We want technological solutions to things, so that those other, if those other solutions go bad, which they always do, it doesn't matter. We have the technology to secure our rights regardless. So that being said, we also are very much interested in software development, including making our own software, and increasing the infrastructure of the Bitcoin network, or helping promote other software projects that are aligned with the visions of the cypherpunks.
Then that's kind of a difference you see. I came from the Ron Paul activism side of things, and one of the slogans you would hear a lot was "End the Fed, end the Fed." And what really excited me about Bitcoin was it gave us the ability to ignore the Fed, ignore them out of existence. Right. We don't have to use their money anymore. We don't have to, do these protests where we're trying to say, end the Fed and all this. We can just ignore them. So what are some of are you able to talk about some of the software projects that you're working on?
Yeah, well, first I'd like to point out, Ron Paul, bless his heart, he's a wonderful guy. He's a role model of my own, although I would never have voted for him because I don't vote. But, he spent decades trying to say end the Fed, and the best we got a lot of people kind of on the ideological side, obviously, but in terms of actual change, the best we got was, his son watering it down, and let's maybe audit the Fed. Maybe can we peek in the door? Not really much of anything. Meanwhile, in a couple of years, I think I guess Satoshi was working on the code for 18 months or something like that. He came out with a solution that 5 years later is already, kind of scaring the Fed in some ways. And governments are having to actually take notice. So in terms of opportunity cost, building software is a far more efficient solution and effective. Software is much more important than any kind of political bantering and lobbying and all of that. Huge waste of time. But we're just getting started on a project of our own. We're still in the pretty early stages, but we're working on a software called Pacioli, and it's going to be a Bitcoin accounting software. So people have a lot of different addresses scattered among many wallets and services and clients. And Pacioli is supposed to be a way to kind of have accounting for them in one place. And it's called Pacioli, named after Luca Pacioli, the father of double-entry bookkeeping.
Oh, so that's interesting. I had Will Pangman on a couple weeks ago, and he's working on a similar thing, kind of keeping all of your wallets in order, called Topeki, and it sounds pretty interesting too. And I kind of want to lead into James Richens has a question here, and I think he's asking, he says, what about online merchants and services? I think maybe what he may be asking is, what do you see as some solutions to merchants taking Bitcoin maybe outside of the regulatory sphere, or maybe solutions that might kind of come up so they don't have to deal so much with exchanges?
So in terms of regulations, I'd love for someone to correct me on it. I honestly, I'm not always up to date with the regulations, so I definitely need correction a lot. But from my understanding, merchants themselves, if you're just a person using Bitcoin, you're not being targeted by Ben Losky. You're of course expected to pay your taxes just like you always have been, but simply using Bitcoin is not a regulatory issue. And also paying taxes tends to be focused on people who spend Bitcoin, and I, of course, suggest people hoard their Bitcoins, including merchants. So I don't think merchants have much to deal with when it comes to regulatory issues. And I know services like BitPay kind of take care of a lot of these issues as well.
So I know Coinbase is very much trying to be compliant with the regulations, or even regulations they think might happen. You're maybe not seeing too much of that from BitPay, but what I do kind of wonder about is merchants who have to use banks for things. And with these regulations in New York, they're saying that you're not going to be able to hold Bitcoin. You're going to be forced to cash out. With Bitcoin. So I'm kind of wondering, I mean,
has that been a thing, like where they've said that you have to cash out?
I think it's somewhere in the regulations. I have to reread it, but I do believe there is a part in there where you're not able to hold. I think it's the proceeds, like the fees that you would be charging in an exchange that you would be getting paid in Bitcoin. You're not able to hold that in Bitcoin. I think that's what it's specifically about. So, but yeah, do you see any solutions being provided by the market?
Well, I mean, my immediate reaction to that is accept Bitcoin. Like, so I guess I'm not totally understanding. So, under this regulation, you're expected to actually cash out. Like, you simply, as a business, are not allowed to hold Bitcoins just as you would hold cash.
Yeah, I don't think you're allowed to hold the fees that you're earning in Bitcoin by charging for the service if you're an exchange.
Oh, this is an exchange.
Yes.
I mean, that's different from if I'm McDonald's and I'm accepting Bitcoin.
Right. I'm sorry. Yeah, my question was kind of unclear there. How do you see, I guess, the market dealing with using exchanges in general, like just centralized exchanges? How do you see the market kind of, because those are the ones that are going to come under the regulations the most. So what are some alternatives that we...
Right, yeah, the exchange is sort of the bottleneck. And to that, I guess I would say, try to hold on to as many Bitcoins as you can instead of cashing out. And that'll end the dollar problem quicker anyway, so you never have to cash out again. But with that, it does seem like a lot more kind of institutional, like kind of Wall Street type money exchanges are going to be coming up. And while there might be heavy costs involved with those, if someone absolutely needs to do exchanges, it'll just be kind of a cost of doing business. But considering I also expect the price of Bitcoin to go up, I expect merchants to start holding on to more Bitcoins anyway.
Right. I talked with Chris about this last week, and I wanted to get your perspective on this. So I think we're pretty much on the same page as far as not caring what the regulators do. But what do you see as kind of internal threats to Bitcoin? Do you view those, what are the internal threats that you see?
So, there's occasionally kind of some development ideas that get thrown around that are perhaps not what we would want. There was one involving voting on Coinbase amounts. So when miners do a Coinbase transaction, there was some sort of voting process to help with some figure what the difficulty was, what exactly the problem they were trying to solve. But things like that, I'm completely against the idea of allocating a Coinbase for anything except for pure kind of proof of work. So occasionally we have people offer some bad ideas, but so far there hasn't been any actual movement forward with any kind of absolutely terrible development ideas. But that being said, even if so, there exists reimplementations of Bitcoin now. So we have stuff like BTCD, made by Conformal Systems. It's written in Go. There's also Amir Taki's Libitcoin, So even if one implementation decides to do something that is questionable, people can refrain from downloading it. People can use a different client. And if there needs to be some sort of fork, that's what happens. And those who choose to use the less popular one will have to bear the cost of having a smaller network. And I would expect people to go to whichever one fulfills Bitcoin's value proposition better, which would be the one that most kind of has more ability to be private, etc. Kind of other internal threats. Yeah, I mean, really, it's just a matter we have to, we do have to keep track of, what the code actually does. When you install software, the software is the protocol. So if if the code is doing something you don't actually agree with, you have to know to not run it. So it's important to actually know kind of, which release is a good one, which one is a bad one not to use. So far, there's not really, there hasn't been any kind of release like that.
All right. We had a good comment from James Richens again. He says, some excellent points. So merchants are being placed to have to use the services which the public should avoid. So actually, I think the accounting wallet sounded great. So yeah, I think that is a really, really good idea too. Especially, yeah, you're dealing with multiple wallets, it can get very complicated. Good.
Well, and on the merchant thing too, there's constantly better platforms for merchants to be using anyway. A lot of people suggest Coinbase, but unless you want to move money into dollars, you don't have to use a trusted third party like Coinbase. You can just roll your own wallet. So I hope that people make better wallets designed for businesses. And then you can have it very safe. You can do it so that you have a hierarchical deterministic wallet that generates a new address for every invoice, just as you'd have with Coinbase or BitPay, but you have it in such a way that the keys are stored offline. So it's a completely offline wallet, but you're still able to do all of the merchant stuff. So that's just a matter of keeping that private key safe. There's no reason for people to have to use services like Coinbase and BitPay, and in fact, BitPay has been working hard on better and better open source software, things like CoPay, which allows you to have a great multi-signature wallet. They have Bitcore, which is just a general JavaScript library that allows you to build web applications that I imagine people to build these merchant services with. So merchants will just be using their own wallets like consumers. The exchange part of it only exists insofar that people have any reason to speculate on dollars, and the entire goal is to keep them from having to speculate on dollars by making the dollar obsolete.
Right on, yeah. Chris Ellis has another comment and question. Thank you, Chris. Great chat, guys. Given we have a small number of developers who can code a cryptocurrency, could an organization like yours create some online training and inspire more people to learn about this?
So that's obviously there does need to be more education on that, and there's plenty I can learn too. I haven't done much systems programming and stuff like that, so there's not much I can do to help currently with the actual core development, and I'm sure there's many people who do want to learn more about that. I would be happy to start having those sorts of resources on our website. There's huge opportunity costs with all sorts of different things we do, but yeah, I mean, stuff like that would be fantastic. It's just sort of a tragedy to come and someone wanting to finally sit down and do it. Luckily, As Bitcoin increases in price and people are more heavily invested in it, they'll start having incentive to make the network better for its own sake. Daniel has a fantastic article called "The Correct Strategy of Bitcoin Entrepreneurship," and what he says is to not be a venture capitalist but be a speculative philanthropist. So as people get richer off Bitcoin, just as sort of a security cost, if you can get more people on the network to increase the price of Bitcoin, or you can invest in software that makes it easier to hoard or send Bitcoins, and that's good for the network itself. So I'm hoping that over time people will have more resources to put towards that. Of course, we're still very much in kind of early stages of Bitcoin, so there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that hasn't been picked yet. Hopefully, stuff like that will get picked soon, and hopefully, Satoshi Nakamoto Institute can find a way to help with that.
Yeah, that would be really great, because I think that's a major concern of people who don't know much about Bitcoin. Is there are a few really good sources you can send them to where they can learn, but as far as kind of learning the deeper side of it, I think it would be good to kind of have something like that. And Matt Gilliland says Nakamoto University, hosted by SNI, Gen Op, and more.
Yeah, that'd be a great addition to Mises University. So spend a week at Mises University learning everything about the economics, and then we can have Nakamoto University to have a couple days of coding workshops, and then a couple days of a hackathon. I think that'd be a good 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, definitely agree. Yeah, thanks for the feedback on that, Matt. So you mentioned privacy earlier. What do you see as what are some exciting innovations for you as far as privacy and anonymizing Bitcoin?
Right. So Dark Wallet, of course, is kind of the go-to answer, and I'm a big fan of Dark Wallet. So things like that. I'm also very excited about some of the things that can be offered by libraries like Open Transactions, which I'm a huge fan of, because that allows things like Chaumian blind cash and stuff like that. I think if we can continue doing stuff like stealth addresses, doing stuff like the CoinJoin and getting CoinJoin right, because most people don't have it correct. If I understand correctly, blockchain.info has shared send or something like that, but it doesn't do it quite right. So it doesn't give the kind of anonymity needed. There's also OpenBazaar. They've been working hard on that. That'll have a lot of this built in as well. Mixing and just finding more ways to obfuscate the blockchain is good. And Dark Wallet is kind of leading the way right now.
Yeah, I feel like we're really right on the edge of having something that's going to be pretty easy for a lot of people to use too, because right now there are ways to do it. It's a little bit complicated. You need to have a little bit more of a tech background to understand some of it. But I really think that people are working hard on it, and there are a lot of different. I'd like to see a lot of competition too. So what are some other functions of the blockchain that you're excited about too, that you think are going to be implemented in the future? I know there's always talk about how Bitcoin is a currency and it's a payment system, but there's also a lot of other functions that are possible.
Right.
So what do you see? What are some of the ones that you're excited about? Like what are whether it's smart contracts or what are you most excited that's maybe outside of the payment system / currency model that we're kind of used to?
So I would like to say, smart contracts are super cool, but I will be honest in saying I think people underestimate first the currency aspect of it. So simply saying Bitcoin is just a currency, well, if they listen to Ron Paul enough or read enough Austrian economics, they realize just how important a sound money in society is. So that alone has enormous impacts on how society functions at all. Yeah, smart contracts are super cool. Like I said, I'm a big fan of open transactions. The reason being is it allows us to issue these assets and contracts backed by Bitcoin. So if you read articles on the Nakamoto Institute, you'll see that we're highly skeptical of competing network effects, the economic viability of competing networks. So the idea of having instead of a competing network that tries to do these assets, have a layer on top of Bitcoin that does not claim to get rid of counterparty risk like Bitcoin does, but instead simply tries to distribute that risk like open transaction does. I think that's a much more fruitful approach. So they have something called voting pools they're working on, which allows you to kind of trust in web services long enough to use them. So it creates a multi-sig wallet among a bunch of web servers. It allows them to do real-time auditing on each other. So that greatly reduces the risk of any one of them. In fact, no single server would be able to run off with your money. You would have to have a supermajority. So that makes it easier to start building web services that people can actually use without having to worry about their money being stolen. And with that, there's been work on financial cryptography once again for decades. We have some of the literature on our website, stuff like the Ricardian contract from Ian Grigg is an interesting one, and stuff about triple entry accounting and True Ledger. But open transactions uses all of these old cypherpunk ideas that have already been developed, and now we're having a way to use Bitcoin as the reserve currency for them. So there's a lot of cool stuff, but yeah, it also has smart contracts as well.
So Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, you told me, is not the biggest fan of app coins and maybe some of these other altcoins out there. And you sent me a debate that two of your members did on Let's Talk Bitcoin. I found it really interesting. So could you kind of elaborate on your thoughts about altcoins and where you see kind of the future of altcoins going? Whether versus Bitcoin or maybe alongside with Bitcoin.
Right. I expect altcoins. Altcoins will probably never go away, but I expect them to be always kind of at the margins of the economy. And even today, we're seeing that altcoins are losing value compared to Bitcoin, and I expect them to stay there. The key thing though is we don't have like an emotional hatred of altcoins or anything. Really, we're just we're just realizing that what we see with currencies is competition of networks, and what we argue is that there does not exist in a free society, in a free market, any reason to have an equilibrium between two networks. One will always outcompete another. The reason being is kind of the value of a network, kind of taking from Metcalfe's law, increases exponentially as more people join it. So because of that, as one network grows, even if it's only bigger by one person, it is exponentially more valuable, and a person has more costs associated with not being a part of that network. So as soon as one network starts to grow, it will continue to grow. And because of that, we shouldn't expect another currency to compete unless it can have, unless it can solve some problem that Bitcoin inherently can't solve, which so far there haven't been any kind of presented in this space. There's things like Ethereum, but even then, as I've said, open transactions, instead of trying to build it into the network itself, has kind of this layer above it, although it can also use Ethereum. But anyway, so there isn't this equilibrium between it. So we're simply saying that one currency will likely completely outcompete all other currencies in a free market. So there's no reason to expect in order for an altcoin to survive, it not only needs to survive, it needs to actually outcompete Bitcoin. So if you have to present an argument as to why it'll completely outcompete Bitcoin, not simply why a couple of people might be interested in using it.
So it's interesting, because I was going to ask you next if you see any other altcoins with that potential at all, but you don't really seem to see that. Are there any?
I haven't.
Yeah, because I hear a lot of times like altcoins are a great testing ground for some new features and different features and stuff like that, and so you're not really seeing.
They say that, and yet, as far as I can see, we haven't actually seen any features be ported into Bitcoin. Although if someone has an example, once again, I'd love to see it. I think there might be like one or two that may have been imported elsewhere. But I'd also like to say that the number one competing altcoin against Bitcoin is Bitcoin itself. So Bitcoin is just software, and it can be changed. So if there is a feature truly worth having in Bitcoin, the better option would not be create an entirely new network, but to simply fork Bitcoin with that new feature. Okay. So if you have this outstanding feature, you also have to be able to argue that Bitcoin inherently can't integrate it within its own system, and that feature is valuable enough for an entire economy to switch. So, for instance, English is a great language, and it has a lot of quirks that people always make fun of and hate on, but it's not like we have things like Esperanto, which are supposed to be these much better, well-designed languages, and yet, despite supposedly being way better than English, it's still not reason enough for everyone to switch over.
Yeah, and as a former English major, I'm very familiar with that, and also having worked with people who have had English as a second language, it's very interesting seeing how frustrated they get, and it's very understandable because it is a very quirky language, but Esperanto is not necessarily an improvement with that. So I'm going to kind of shift gears. You mentioned you spoke at the Texas Bitcoin conference. I was also there, and I think I missed your presentation. It sucks that we kind of missed each other passing, but you're also going to be speaking at Coins in the Kingdom coming up, so I'm really excited about that. What do you want to see as far as conferences go? It seems like I was talking with Stephanie Murphy a couple weeks ago, and we kind of agreed, her friend was having a conversation, that there's kind of this bubble in Bitcoin conferences right now. There just seems to be a whole lot of them.
I've joked for a while that Bitcoin's not in a bubble, but Bitcoin conferences are. So yeah, so I mean, there are a lot of Bitcoin conferences, and it's a bit overwhelming, and in some ways it seems kind of counterproductive. It seems like if you want to make Bitcoin a thing, you should be at home coding and kind of building companies and software that actually make use of Bitcoin, rather than talking to other Bitcoiners about how much you love Bitcoin. That being said, there is a place for kind of a forum to share new ideas. Also, hackathons are great. So if, it's a good place to get together and be trying new things. So it's not that conferences are worthless, but there are quite a few. Maybe too many. I can't speak for the market, but. I did want to go to this one, of course. I was very happy when you invited me because it's a great group of people, many radicals, many people working on like seriously cool things. So I'm excited to go and share some new ideas I've been working on, kind of more of a, I guess, intellectual perspective rather than a technical one. But I'm super excited. Plus, it's at Disney World.
Yes, that's what I'm really excited about. I think it's going to be a really fun conference. We want to make it kind of different from other ones because, like you mentioned, there's so many out there, and it's getting to the point where you kind of question, what are the purposes of some of these? Some of them obviously have a very pro-regulation theme, or like they have a very pro-venture capitalist theme, or and there's other ones with different themes. We kind of did the radical, like we don't need UDC. Bitcoin in the Beltway one, but Coins in the Kingdom we want it to make really fun. So what do you want to see in a conference that would set it apart from maybe some of the other conferences that you've been to?
Well, I do want to see Mickey Mouse there. I want to see him accepting Bitcoin. Yeah, that's actually a good question. I guess for me, my interests in Bitcoin are very intellectual and very technically minded. So those are the two things. Like for me, I'm not as much interested in what is this new business you're offering. Not that businesses are bad, but there's a gazillion of those. But I'd like to hear very good ideas and actually more how can we build open source software, since that's what makes Bitcoin great in the first place. So kind of those two spheres are what I'm interested in. So hopefully we'll see a bit of that. I know a lot of smart people will be offering some intellectual ideas at the conference, and then we have people like Kyle Drake. He's been working on some really cool stuff on the technical side. So I think it's going to have the mix that I like.
And that's what you see a lot from the people who go to conferences. They tend to like that more kind of technical stuff. We do want to make it as educational and kind of open to beginners as possible too, but you don't always see a whole lot of beginners at these things. I still think people are a bit intimidated, but one good thing is you're seeing a lot of meetups kind of popping up to fill that need too, and I think those are probably a better way for outreach in general. You have that face-to-face contact with someone in a familiar place that's local to them, and they're not having to go to a conference where they're around a bunch of maybe experts and they may feel intimidated. So we do have some good alternatives there, but we do want to have like a Bitcoin beginners workshop there. I think it's going to be awesome. I'm going to be doing an interview with Jason King. Hopefully sometime this weekend we'll be talking more about that, but we want to make it pretty different from some of these other conferences out there because it can be kind of repetitive sometimes, but it is a good way to reconnect with people in the space because so many of us are connected online, but we don't really get to see each other in person so much either. So for me, it's kind of like a kind of re-energizes me, helps me refocus. So
it's actually my network was bad that whole time, so I have no clue what you were talking about, but I'm sure it's wonderful things.
Oh, Hangouts. I was just saying we're going to try to make Coins in the Kingdom a little bit different and really fun, of course, but yeah, educational as well. Try to make it as open for beginners as possible, but there's also people working on the meetup side of things that I think are better educational-wise because people aren't as intimidated. If you go to a conference and you're around a bunch of people who are already into Bitcoin, I remember when I first kind of heard about it and were around people who were into Bitcoin, like it was kind of like blowing my mind, like I don't really know what's what's going on, I don't really understand the terminology, but you're seeing a lot more communicators come to the space too, like people who are able to translate these highly technical ideas into ones that are easy to understand. So it looks like we lost Michael again. This is what happens with Hangouts occasionally. I am looking into other avenues for recording, but yeah, right now we're going to stick with Hangouts and see how it goes. And he's back. Hello.
So if this can't work, how are we ever going to expect Bitcoin to work?
Oh, I know, it's over. We should just give up, right? I mean, it's it's over. Bitcoin's dead. So, where else can I guess we will kind of keep this. We'll kind of finish this up. We're having connectivity issues. So, where can people keep up with your work? Where can they follow you?
NakamotoInstitute.org is our website. So that's the best place. we don't put content up all the time. We we like to focus on quality versus quantity. So we're not like a lot of these Bitcoin tabloids that exist now that just kind of throw out whatever was on our Bitcoin yesterday. So if we've kind of come up with a new idea or want to clarify an idea that's been floating around, usually Daniel will be the one to write an article on it. So keep up with us there, and you can follow us on Twitter as well. And it's pretty much the place we hang out at.
All right. Well, I really like the approach of quality over quantity, and from what I've looked into with the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute, I've really, really liked it. I think it's a really great resource for the community, and more people, need to know about it because it's very quality oriented, and that's how Bitcoin Not Bombs is too. We try to get a good amount of articles out on the blog, but we try to make sure that they're quality, and we're not really just trying to put out. We're not trying to make Bitcoin, some tabloid or there's so much good news out there, but there's so much crap news too, and then there's so much speculation. Unfortunately, I do kind of worry that Bitcoin media may be going in the same direction as other medias that we see, which that's kind of disappointing to me, as a writer. But I like to see kind of a return back to the quality over quantity aspects.
Right, and I would like to point out, and this is kind of true of almost everything. Like, it doesn't matter if there's these Bitcoin tabloids. There's always going to be haters and skeptics. Visit the Nakamoto Institute skeptics page to see plenty of this, where we call them out. There's always going to be these type of people, people who are trying to scam others using Bitcoin, people trying, like, all kinds of just terrible people doing terrible things in some way. But ultimately, Bitcoin was it keeps going on. So even if it's kind of disheartening to see this, it doesn't mean that's the end of Bitcoin. In fact, it's kind of a sign that Bitcoin is becoming more of a thing. So you just gotta nod your head and look the other way.
That's true. Any other final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with?
No, not really. Just buy Bitcoin, hoard, and just do that over and over, and code.
Buy Bitcoin, hoard, and code. Well, thanks so much, Michael, for joining me today. Definitely check out the Satoshi Nakamoto Institute. There's a lot of good stuff on there, very good resource. And my guest for next week is going to be Mark Dumisel of NextCoin. We're going to kind of be exploring what happened with NextCoin the past couple of weeks. And until next time, keep calm and encrypt on.